We found a phenomenal jump in the use of AI. Last year, as a part of our legal trends research, we surveyed over 1,000 legal professionals, and 1 out of 5 were telling us they were using AI in some form in the practice of law. This year, when we asked that same question, 4 out of 5 legal professionals were using AI. It jumped from 19% to 79%.
Today on LawNext, the 2024 Clio Legal Trends Report. At the recent Clio Cloud Conference in Austin, Texas, Clio released its 9th annual Legal Trends Report, a report that uses both survey responses and anonymized data from Clio users to paint a picture of key trends in law practice and legal technology. This year's report had some intriguing findings on lawyers' adoption of AI and the types of law office tasks that could be automated using AI. The survey also looks at trends in hourly and flat fee billing and includes the results of a secret shopper study of lawyers' responses to inquiries from potential clients. Or maybe I should say lawyers' lack of responses. To discuss all of this and more, I sat down live at the Clio conference with Joshua Lenon, Clio's lawyer in residence and one of the principal authors of the report. Note that I've already posted 2 other episodes recorded live at ClioCon, one with Clio's founder and CEO Jack Newton, and another with what I described as the Clio Power Trio of Clio's COO Ronnie Gurion, CFO Kurt Sigstead, and board member and investor Mark Britton. I am Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. And before we get to that, please take a moment to learn about the sponsors whose generosity helps keep this podcast going. Reduce the time you spend on non-billable work with Bill for Time, the most trusted name in legal time tracking and billing software. Bill for Time automates your time tracking with multiple timers, standardizes your invoicing with custom templates, and gets your firm paid up to 70% faster with built-in online payment processing. Discover how Bill for Time can help you work more efficiently by visiting billfortime.com. That's Bill, the number 4, time.com. Now let's get to that conversation with Joshua Lenon. Joshua Lenon, welcome to LawNext.
It's great to be here, Bob. Thank you so much for having me.
And we are here live on the floor at the Clio Cloud Conference, the 12th Clio Cloud Conference, and just released the ninth, right, Legal Trends Report. And you're gonna tell us a little bit about the Legal Trends Report, but first start off telling me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I'm Joshua Lenon. I'm the lawyer in residence at Clio. This 12th ClioCon is actually the 12th work anniversary for me at Clio. And I've spent greater than a decade now acting as a translator for how lawyers practice law to a technology company that's looking to help, and vice versa, translating what technology is teaching us about the practice of law back to the greater legal community. And that ties into one of the projects that I help with, which is the Legal Trends Report.
Congratulations on that. I did not realize this was your 12th anniversary, and I should, because I met you not long after, very soon after I think you joined the company.
Yeah.
We talked about this recently, but I think it was an event in Boston or something where I met you for the first time. I remember that well. Well, so the Legal Trends Report just came out, and it's always a fascinating picture of what's going on in law practice and some of the trends in law practice. What's the headline this year? What's the big takeaway for you this year?
There are so many big headlines. That's actually a problematic question for me. I think one of the numbers that a lot of people are going to jump onto is we did a big data review of time entries in Clio and how automatable is that billable work. And what we found is 75% of hourly billable work is potentially subject to AI automation. And so that's 75% of your billable hourly revenue just might be automated away.
So this goes to the question, I mean, everybody's talking about, is AI going to replace lawyers, or is it going to put me out of a job? Mm-hmm. And there had been who had done the study before, talking about 40-something.
Goldman Sachs, yeah.
Right? And as I understood it, you took some of the same data that Goldman Sachs had worked with, but then applied it against the data that you have from the anonymized data from Clio users, and was able to give a more nuanced picture of what that looks like. Right?
That's absolutely true. So Goldman Sachs looked at work activities, and these are like just generic work activities as described by the Occupational Information Network. It's often called ONET. And they actually apply these generic work activities to over 900 occupations, including lawyers, paralegals, and legal secretaries. And then within those occupations, you can look at breakdowns of detailed work activities for them. So preparing documents as a generic activity might have preparing legal documents for a lawyer, right, with some additional descriptions. And as we were looking at Goldman Sachs' study and trying to figure out more about this classification system, it became more and more apparent to me that a lot of these detailed work activities look like time entries, which we have a lot of. And so running a filter to make sure that we were looking only at anonymized aggregate time entries, we ended up classifying over 7 million time entries against ONET's detailed work activities. So something like wrote a subpoena became prepared a legal document. And then we were able to look at the automation potential of all of those detailed work activities. And what we found is a lawyer's detailed work activities, about 57% of that is probably automatable. For a legal secretary, 81% of their work activities is automatable. And so for the average across lawyers, paralegals, and legal secretaries is 74% of work activities are subject to AI automation now.
So what does that mean? Does that mean that, in fact, legal professionals' fears are well-founded, that they're going to be put out of work by AI?
I don't think they're going to be put out of work because no task had 100% automation. But what they do need to fear is that 75% of their recorded billable hours might disappear and be replaced by AI. And what does that mean for your law firm's finances? What does that mean for the sustainability of the law firm? What does that mean for your hourly fees? Like, these are all questions we should be asking now as we see there's this incredibly rapid adoption of AI across the legal industry.
Yeah. One of the data points in the study involved the adoption of AI up to now by legal professionals, by lawyers. Again, I think that this is really interesting because there's been for all the talk about AI, I think it's really unclear to what extent it's actually being used or deployed in law practices. So what did you find on that count?
We found just phenomenal jump in the use of AI. And so last year, as a part of our legal trends research, we surveyed over 1,000 legal professionals, and 1 out of 5 were telling us they were using AI in some form in the practice of law. This year, when we asked that same question, 4 out of 5 legal professionals were using AI. It jumped from 19% to 79%. Now, they're not all using it at the same level. Like 8% said that it was being universally used across their entire law firm. It was around 32% said it was being, kind of narrowly used.
Minimally or partially used.
Yeah, minimally or partially used. But still, that's 79% of legal professionals saying, yeah, AI is in our law firm.
Yeah. Does that data give you any insights as to how it's being used or what products are being used or that sort of thing?
At a high level, yes. We did ask different categories of products, both like consumer generic products like ChatGPT and legal specific products like legal research, document drafting. And we found that the most widely used is still ChatGPT and other generic generative AI tools. But we're also starting to see the rise and adoption of legal-specific tools. One of the ones that was really interesting to me was legal predictive analytics, powered by AI. 9% of legal professionals were telling us they were using that, and I expect that number to grow. And then we also asked, what are lawyers trusting AI to do? And most of the time, the highest trusted use case was marketing materials. So business of law as opposed to practice of law. But shortly thereafter, it was about finding information, digging through my files, and finding specific terms and instances and evidence, and it continues like that.
Yeah, I know that you're somebody who's on the road a lot, going to a lot of conferences, talking to a lot of lawyers. Does that 79% number comport with what you're hearing in the field when you're out talking to people? Because it doesn't to me, actually. That's what's funny. I'm trying to.
Well, we held a workshop on applying this year's Legal Trends Report. Okay, these are the numbers, but what does that mean, and what do I do with it? one of the things I talked about was, if AI is widely adopted, how do we apply it? And so I said, how many people in this room have ChatGPT on their phone right now? And there was like a sea of hands that were raised. Yeah. And so I had an exercise, which also relates to another chapter in this year's report, where I asked them to write a response email to their prospective ideal client. And I gave them a couple bullet points. And I said, this is your prompt. This is what you want ChatGPT to do it. And it was almost like a race. One lawyer in under 15 seconds said, I just went through 3 drafts and I have an email that I would send a client.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I keep getting a different message, and maybe I'm talking to different lawyers or different audiences of lawyers, but earlier this summer now, which is maybe a long time ago in the world of the evolution of generative AI, but at a conference with a number of lawyers who, when I asked who's even used ChatGPT at all, there were like 2 hands that went up in a pretty large audience.
Yeah.
And maybe they were shy, I don't know. But
I think we also have a lot of forward-thinking lawyers at this conference.
Right, well, that's the thing.
So it might be self-selecting there too.
Yeah. This may not necessarily be a representative sample of all of that. On that question of how much of law can be automated, I mean, my reading of the findings is that they tend to be the more routine tasks. It mentions in the report things like actually just getting information or analyzing data, documenting information. Does that offer lessons at all for lawyers about how they should maybe be structuring or restructuring the way they do things, their workflows? Or?
I think there are a couple of different approaches that could be prompted by this, right? What we're probably going to see in like bigger law firms is, if they see their recorded hours dwindle, they're going to increase their hourly fees for those hours, right? In order to make up that revenue. That might not be the best approach. I think a second approach is, I'm going to have free time. How am I going to leverage that free time? Like, can I do more business development? Can I be a better counselor and coach to my clients, right? And so I can build more business, more referrals, more volume. The third approach, and then we talk about this in the Legal Trends Report, is, should I be charging hourly for this at all? Or would a more reasonable and sustainable fee be a flat fee for when I'm pairing AI and my own professional independent judgment together to get an outcome on behalf of my client?
Yeah. Well, again, this has been a topic of a lot of discussion since the advent of generative AI, and yesterday during his keynote, Jack Newton, Clio CEO, declared the death of the billable hour, more or less, with a slide that had a big RIP for the billable hour. Is the death of the billable hour greatly exaggerated, or are we?
I don't think it's going to die, but I think it's in retreat.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm interested in our next coming Legal Trends Report is, are we going to start to see evidence of that retreat now, right? Is this like the tipping point? But I think there'll always be kind of a time and a place, no pun intended, for the billable hour.
Right.
But I think we're going to see it applied less and in fewer instances as AI becomes just more and more widely used throughout the legal industry.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things that I look at in all these ethics opinions about AI is they always make a point of, you can't lie, basically, and say a task that you normally build 3 hours for that now takes like 10 minutes with AI, you can't lie and say that took me 3 hours.
Right.
And everybody thinks that mean you can't have any type of appropriate billing for the outputs of AI, and I don't think that's the case.
Right.
ABA, Model Rules of Professional Conduct, Rule 1.5 on fees, has a whole host of factors in determining a reasonable fee, and time and labor is only one of those. There's the speed to produce that fee, there's the value of the matter in question,
right.
There's your own expertise,
right,
being applied, and that's why I think flat fees might be better paired with AI-supported services.
Yeah, and this again, the Trends Report finds that there has been a steady increase, right, in flat fee billing?
Yeah, what we've seen is it's gone from 15% of law firm revenue to 19%. So that's a pretty big jump.
From 26, is that from last year?
2016 all the way to
now,
2024.
Yeah.
But there's been some other changes as well. The amounts for flat fees that are being charged. Actually, they're growing faster than the amounts that are being charged for hourly billing. The average amount for an hourly billable matter has only grown about 27% in the last 9 years.
Yeah.
It's grown over 90% for flat fees. So they're charging more, and I think that indicates potentially more complex matters being brought in, right? And clients actually just willing to pay more for price certainty. And in addition to the individual flat fees growing, we also see that they're more likely to get paid, twice as fast to get paid immediately, and they tend to close at twice as fast a rate as an hourly matter. So even though you're bringing in more complex matters, you're still closing them faster and moving on to the next case.
Yeah.
So there's some really interesting benefits that have good incentives for productivity and adoptions of tools like generative AI when using flat fees.
Yeah. And what about clients? How do they feel about flat fees?
Overwhelmingly in favor of them. 71% of clients surveyed say they want flat fees. They want to pay one flat fee for the whole matter. Interestingly, 71% of law firms are offering hourly billing.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they're sailing past each other.
Yeah. The other interesting thing is that with generative AI, there are now tools available. I don't think Clio has any of these yet, but I've seen certainly tools out there on the market that are using generative AI to help lawyers more accurately and intelligently set flat fees in a way that are, reflect the value of the work and that appropriately compensate lawyers, but are also fair to clients. So this technology that could in some ways be leading to the demise of the billable hours, also making it easier to charge on a flat fee.
Yeah,
I think.
Absolutely. We have a vendor here at the Clio Cloud Conference, AltFee.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
AltFee, yeah.
That's their product. They're
looking
at
ABA
both.
Tech Show last year.
Yeah, they're looking at a law firm's own individual billing as well as marketplace trends to help set an appropriate flat fee. So lawyers don't have to go this alone. We also in 2018's Legal Trends Report published the average as well as segmented case values that we see across different practice areas. Unfortunately, I can't tell you what's the average value of a civil litigation case that somebody won versus what somebody lost. We don't see the case files, but I can tell you what was the average case value and what was the 90% highest case value.
Yeah.
And we can start to use this data to figure out what could be a reasonable flat fee for the type of outcomes that our clients are seeking and start experimenting with them now.
Yeah. You're listening to my interview with Joshua Lenon, lawyer in residence at Clio, discussing the findings from the 9th edition of the Clio Legal Trends Report. Stay tuned because there's plenty more to talk about, but first, please take this opportunity to learn about the sponsors whose generosity supports LawNext. Are you looking for ways to streamline your firm's time tracking and billing? Bill for Time helps you practice more and manage less. With intuitive time tracking, standardized invoicing, customizable templates, and built-in online payment processing that gets your firm paid up to 70% faster. See why Bill for Time is the most trusted name in time and legal billing software by visiting them today at billfortime.com. That's Bill, the number 4, time.com. Welcome back to LawNext. And by the way, we're very appreciative of the sponsors who support this podcast. If you'd like to learn how you can become one of them, reach out to us. For a full media kit, email Ben Ambrogi. That's Ben at lawnextmedia.com. This year's Legal Trends Report includes an update on a so-called secret shopper study that Clio last did in 2019, in which law firms were contacted by email and by phone by people purporting to be seeking legal help. It was done in order to evaluate firms' responsiveness. The results were, not good, and were noticeably down this year from 2019. So as we turn to the conversation with Joshua Lenon, that's where we pick up. Another highlight of this year's Legal Trends Report was kind of a repeat or an update on a study that we first did in 2019, the secret shopper study.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that was and what you found?
Yeah, in 2019, we actually emailed and phone called 1,000 different law firms with highly targeted secret shoppers.
Not calling saying I'm Clio, calling saying I'm
a
potential
prospective client.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd like to hire you. Can you answer a few questions? The 2019 numbers were not very encouraging, to be perfectly honest. 60% of law firms just never emailed back. Only 2 out of 1,000 law firms rated excellent on their email response. Out of 500 law firms we called, only 22 law firms rated excellent, right? They just failed to do simple things like have a likable tone or explain the next step in hiring that lawyer or clarify that, yes, they handle this type of matter. And I found that last one's really interesting. Like, hi, I'm looking for a lawyer that can help me with a divorce. Do you handle this? And what we saw back then was most lawyers didn't address that as a part of their messaging. So fast forward to 2024, we recreate this with 500 law firms. We actually added some additional channels of outreach. We added chatbots. We added online intake forums. And what we found is when the shoppers went through and tried to reach out to these law firms, 73% of them would not recommend the law firm they contacted, right? It's just the law firm basically destroyed the relationship with that potential client and any referral business that potential client would ever send them by just either not answering their phone or not answering questions when asked. We saw a drop in every metric. Fewer law firms answered their emails. Fewer law firms verified that they handled this type of case. It went from something like 24% to 9%. It was just such a poor showing all the way over. There were a couple bright spots. If a shopper actually had a law firm that answered the phone, those rated highest in terms of customer service and the ability to get information, although still incredibly low when trying to find any type of pricing information. Second place was actually chatbots, which surprised me that they came in second place over email, but it was actually the responsiveness that helped with that. Is that law firms weren't telling their chatbots to answer questions like pricing.
A man with a fishbowl on his head just walked by, I have to note for the record.
Yep.
With actual fish in it.
You can hear the smiles in our face. We have to find that later. And those law firms that did answer emails answered faster, but there were fewer law firms that did it. So whereas 60% answered emails in 2019, or 60% did not answer emails in 2019, 67% didn't answer them in 2024. And given like the rapid adoption of technology, the rise of these new like virtual communication technologies, the fact that these numbers got worse just was so disappointing.
What happened with the chatbots? I don't know that I saw that in the study, but were the response rates better from the chatbots, or how did that work?
The response rates were better. They weren't as high as if somebody actually answered the phone, but they were in second place in every category. Yeah, so customer service, the ability to find out what the next steps were, does the law firm handle this case? They were second place in all of those categories. Beating out email. And so that was interesting to me because we just didn't have chatbots in the mix back in 2019 to the degree that we have now. And so to see them perform second best was interesting. When we surveyed legal consumers, like in a separate survey, and we surveyed over 1,000 legal consumers, 51% of them actually said a chatbot's a good starting place to look at hiring a law firm. However, 61% of them cautioned us in saying, we want the chatbot to lead to talking to a lawyer. That's why I want to use it.
Right.
So the soundbite that I've been giving for this is people are fine chatting with chatbots, but they want to talk with a lawyer.
Right.
Make sure that's how it happens.
Yeah, there are some tools out there, again, that are using generative AI to make those chatbots seem maybe like a little more natural of a conversation. A little bit more like actually talking to a human being, which could be good or bad. I mean, you don't want to deceive people into maybe thinking they are talking to a human being or chatting with a human being at some point. But it does seem like there is a lot of potential for generative AI to improve that chat experience on intake.
Yeah, and I think if you tie the chatbot into your communication channels, that's where it really becomes like a strong tool.
Yeah.
So you don't want the chatbot to give this great impression of customer service and then be like, okay, phone us.
Yeah.
And then nobody answers the phone.
Right.
And so I recommend pair it with an online scheduler, something where there's a concrete action that's being taken, so the person leaves the chat feeling like they've accomplished something.
Right.
And that will actually make the chatbot a good lead source for your law firm.
Yeah. One other thing, you may have made this point, but I'm not sure that I picked up on it, was that even among the firms that did, in fact, respond within a reasonable time in some way, the response was often inadequate.
Yeah.
I mean, they were responding, but they didn't provide the information that would have made it that the client might have wanted.
Yeah, and this was really disappointing to me. Again, we have a very small list of what we were looking for in a response, right? Did you handle this type of matter? And given that we've seen the widespread adoption of tools like ChatGPT, right? The fact that they couldn't get a decent email out, even when they have an AI that can write it for them, showed how they just aren't thinking about communicating with potential clients as important, right? They are not including price information. They're not including estimates. They're not talking about, do you charge hourly or flat fee? These are simple things that could be communicated early on, both to convince a potential client to become a client, but also to weed out the window shoppers, right?
Yeah.
If you're not the right fit, you can use this messaging to your benefit. And they just weren't even including these low bars of information.
Yeah.
So take a look at this report. I think it's actually one of the most actionable things that lawyers reading it can do. They all have email, they all have phones. Learn how to answer the phone and have some prepared answers.
Nobody answers the phone anymore. Come on, Josh.
Have a templated email that you send back, right?
Yeah.
You don't even have to write it anew each time.
Yeah.
We'll tell you what they're asking. Just have a paragraph that lists that out, and that will get the ball rolling for you.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me because the technology around client intake was slow to develop. I feel like it was one of the areas that even for a company like Clio, before you had Clio Grow, you didn't really have something around that function, and other companies were the same way. So it was took a little while for that technology to start to evolve. But there is now very evolved technology that makes it very easy. And I've noticed, certain practice areas are much better at this than other practice areas. I don't know if you saw that in this report, but I know, if I go to a conference where there's a lot of personal injury lawyers, they've got intake down to
it is a art, system, right? Yeah. And because they know if they don't get a response out in 24 hours, some other law firm will, and they'll get that client, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm jumping around a little bit. I know we don't have much more time here to talk, but one of the other areas that was covered in the report this year was just kind of spending on marketing and technology. And I wonder if there's anything about that you stood out to you, or
so it wasn't a surprise, but we were able to verify that the average law firm is just not spending that much on marketing and technology. On average, it was 5% for marketing, 2% or less for technology, which means that, just like we always knew, law firms are a comparatively cheap business to run, right? You don't have to have a lot of cash flow going in and out. But what we did find is firms that were willing to invest in these, and I'm not talking by much. I was estimating 7% on marketing and 3% on software and technology. They were seeing outsized returns, 21% increased profitability, just by spending just this tiny bit more. And so what's happening is they're obviously bringing in more leads, right? And using software and technology to increase their efficiency, whether it's converting those leads into clients or creating the type of outputs that lead to billable revenue.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep researching further into this, but this is the first time we've had actual data that's showing what the average law firm spends and how you should budget, and then what small tweaks to that budget can give you.
Yeah. The good news is they are continuing to spend more on tech. The investment in technology has steadily risen, and in marketing has steadily risen over the years.
Since 2013, it's risen 21%. But that's still, on average, only 2% of a law firm's revenue.
Right, right, yeah. Anything else in the survey, in the report rather, that you that stood out to you? I've jumped around a little bit in different parts of it, and listeners, we'll give you the link before we're done here where you can read the whole thing for yourself.
One of the interesting things about this Legal Trends report is, rather than just looking at a bunch of different statistics, is I think they all very much link together, right? If we're looking at AI increasing efficiency but decreasing billable hours, right? What does that mean for the law firm's budget? What does that mean for the law firm's capacity to actually do better business development? AI is going to free up your time, right? But your budget might suffer because of that. Use that free time to go get more business.
Right.
And how are you going to do that? Answer your phone, please.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But then, once you get that business in, they might not necessarily be as receptive to hourly billing as they used to be. So take a look at the research on flat fees and how to apply that to your law firm, and look at maybe experimenting with hybrid billing. I think this is probably the most integrated legal trends report that we've ever published, where it's not just random startling insights, but an actual look at a changing opportunity and the law firms that are seizing it. And this is the final point I'll raise. When we asked these two questions, like how widely are you using AI, and are you exclusively billing via flat fee? 50% of the law firms that bill exclusively from flat fee were also the widest adopters of AI, right? And so they've clearly figured out that they can use AI to be productive, and clients are willing to pay for the output, not the labor they're receiving. And that's the future of the practice of law.
Yeah. Well, Joshua, as I said, there is a PDF download for anybody who wants to read and get more information out of this report. Where the heck do they find it?
Clio.com/LTR. That stands for Legal Trends Report, LTR. It's free for everybody. We have both our latest and our past editions. They all have good stories, but I highly encourage our listeners to go and read it. And if they have any questions, reach out to me.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. Good to talk to you.
It's always great to talk to you, Bob. I really enjoy it.
Thanks to Joshua Lenon, Clio's lawyer in residence, for sitting down with me to share the findings from the Legal Trends Report. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you'd like to share your own thoughts or comments on today's show, please do so by messaging us on LinkedIn or X, or by emailing me directly, ambrogi@gmail.com. And if you're a fan of LawNext, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. LawNext is a production of LawNext Media. I'm your host, Bob Ambrogi. I hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of LawNext.